Today's Lunch and Learn event would not be possible if it wasn't for the outstanding team at Job.com. Job.com is one of our newest corporate partners and are a welcome addition to the group of thought leaders whose services and products are available to our members. I encourage you all to get to know them and to find out how they can help your business when it comes to staffing, hiring, or anything else that you hear today. I would like to sincerely thank our panelists for joining us today and sharing their insights on this critical issue. Please welcome from General Motors, Molly Cantalini, Recruiting Manager, Manufacturing Sourcing. Let's also welcome Tuyen Tran, Waymo's Head of Recruiting, Product and Engineering Operations. And from Microsoft, we have Brian Wilson, VP Midwest, U.S. Automotive Leader. And last, but certainly not least, let's welcome David Stanislaw, founder and principal at his namesake, Stanislaw Consulting. Next slide, please. And it's a pleasure right now to turn over today's session to Chris Nichols, the Vice President of Strategy and Implementation at Job.com. Chris has done a fantastic job in assembling this great panel of experts. Thank you for being here with us today, Chris, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Abby. I used to give the elder statesmen in my companies a hard time because they always use pictures that were really old. And I have now realized that I'm using a picture that's really old, and I think I'm going to keep doing it. There's less gray hairs in that photo. I'm excited to be on here today. Abby, that was a great introduction. Thank you so much for that. I'm very excited to have Molly, Tuyen, Brian, and David today. David, if you're there, please go ahead and turn on your video so we can get everybody going. There we go. So as Abby mentioned, this was a funny realization that we came to in the pre-meeting, but COVID wrecked our worlds. And in fact, so much, Molly works for GM in Seattle and Brian works for Microsoft in Detroit. So we've just turned the entire world upside down. We're designing cars in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. I mean, who knows what's going to happen next? But I am so excited for the shifts that we've seen in recruiting, in talent management, across the business space. Yes, the pandemic has been a significant hurdle, but I also believe wholeheartedly that businesses became more efficient in the way that they communicate with each other, in the way that they attract talent. And some of these things were out of necessity, but sometimes in times of necessity, it breeds the greatest innovation and techniques. So I hope this panel today will enlighten all of the guests around what's happening. The one thing that I always find as a consultant myself, working with organizations, doing talent solutions, designs, and things of that nature, is that most people in this space always wonder if what they're doing is right. And I will tell you that if you're working hard, you are doing it right. And it's important that you join these panels to understand that what you're doing probably isn't that much different than the things that are happening at global players like Microsoft and General Motors. It might be on a smaller scale, but have faith and keep grinding because we're all working together. And encourage you all to ask questions today. Take the most of the next 52 minutes that we have together. Please use the Q&A, the chat, etc. I will be reviewing that throughout. I will tell you that if your question at the time is timely and I can insert it there, I will. Otherwise, I'll save some of the questions for the end of the conversation today. So without further ado, welcome panelists. So Tuyen from Waymo, Molly with General Motors, David with Stanislaw Consulting, and Brian with Microsoft. I'll get started with some questions if you guys don't mind. So thumbs up if everybody can hear me okay. And I haven't been talking to myself for the last 5 minutes. Awesome. Okay. So, we're going to start with Molly up in Seattle. When we talked pre-meeting, you shared a lot of information with me about the major hiring initiatives that are going on at General Motors. And I'm sure that whenever those were announced to you, you were like, oh, cool, we're going to be hiring lots of people in what might be the most competitive market we've ever seen. So I'd love for you to share how you have planned for your team to do the kind of hiring at volume that you've done here in North America, and how you've worked through this incredibly challenging time.
Yeah, so It's definitely not an easy market today. It's not the market that we've seen historically. A couple things that we've looked at doing is really leaning into the technology that we can control within the talent acquisition space to streamline that process both for my employees, but also for our candidates. What can we do to remove as many barriers as possible on both ends? And a big part of that is investing in new technology. Looking at how can candidates self-schedule? How can we build that in on our side so that the recruiters have a streamlined process on that front end and the candidates are moving through as quickly as possible. You're on mute.
Can you all hear me now?
Yep.
Whew, my computer froze up for a second. I apologize. I had such a great follow-up question, Molly. You mentioned technology. What's your favorite piece of technology that you've added in the last 6 months, year, 18 months?
I am a huge fan of two that we've implemented recently. One is Paradox. And so we use Paradox for candidates to self-schedule, and we're looking at building that out for a candidate care module as well, so that people can go into our site and ask, like, what are your benefits? And Evie, who is our Paradox helper, she will answer that for you, or she will prompt you to the right spot on our page. The other piece is Hired Score. And what Hired Score does is a couple things. One, it helps my recruiters understand who the best applicants are, but it also helps us to see if our job descriptions are too long or not getting the right people into the space. So it does a couple different things, both for the candidates and telling us that, hey, your job descriptions are looking a little dusty, but it also helps my recruiters to say, hey, Chris is the best applicant here, like start with him.
Got it. Love it. Technology is probably one of the fastest game changers in the industry today, helping organizations move more effectively through the process. I love the way that you described making it easier on both sides, because that's the key to true efficiency. You can make it great for the candidate, but if it's difficult for the recruiter, they're going to be unhappy, which will then in turn create a terrible experience for the candidate at some point in the process. So balance is key. So let's take the transformation route. I'm going to head over to Brian. So Brian, I'd love to hear, we talked about the change management that's occurred over the last couple of years, but tell me how Microsoft is approaching the digital transformation in the automotive industry and how it fits. Because I don't think most of us look at Microsoft and we're like, oh yeah, Microsoft and GM should be like hanging out together in the same like parties.
That's great. Yeah. I'll take that, and thank you for having me. I think Molly teed up the conversation really well with talking about how digital is more and more a part of the core processes of what a company like GM does. And yeah, for sure, Microsoft. We're not in the automotive industry. We're not an automotive company. Our approach is to be a trusted partner to OEM suppliers, really the entire ecosystem. And I mean, we all know that the acceleration of the automotive industry is accelerating, and the core part of that is digital, right? And you can just hear various automakers and their public announcements around how they're transforming not only to EVs and autonomous capabilities, but also even to pure digital capabilities. And so that's changing the profile of the workforce that they're hiring for. And going after core software engineers and everybody around building digital assets and digital products, but also just skilling within every worker and their need to interact with these digital tools. Like one simple example is some of the cool work Toyota North America is doing around getting students from out of school to productive in their production processes within 2 weeks, and using tools from Microsoft around mixed reality and in our HoloLens product, which allows them to sort of speed up their training, right? And so it's allowed some flexibility in terms of where and how people recruit and to bring in talent, because every automaker struggles with having the right expertise in the right spot at the right moment. And so experimenting with these digital tools and digital capabilities for everybody in the workforce is helping companies compete. And so, our role, people know us as productivity tools and platforms for everybody, developer tools, cloud computing, some of the advanced capabilities for sure. And that is the role that we provide as a platform. And then lastly, I'll come back to skilling has been a growing topic and something we're investing in, heavily around the world. And that is, when you look at the talent market, and automakers under these transformations, you have that choice point. How much do we go out to market and get talent, and how much do we develop the talent from within? And so these skilling programs that we provide around technology from foundational to advanced sort of allows all companies to be able to take a look at their needs of their workforce and invest in their development to enable them for this digital world.
You make a few good points there. As far as productivity tools, I gotta say, I really am a big fan of Microsoft Teams these days.
Thank you, Chris.
I know we're on a Zoom call right now, but I do want to say that I am an evangelist of Microsoft Teams. So anybody that says it's not a good tool, I'm like, no way. And I'll say, call Brian if you have any questions. But you made a couple of good points there around it's the transformation that we've gone through is actually quite interesting. I mean, shoot, my wife and I have been through the process of purchasing a new family car, and the thing that she was most concerned about was how big was the screen going to be in the dashboard. Like she wanted, a big screen, high definition. I'm like, I need you focused on the windshield, if you don't mind, while you're driving the kids around. But there's just so much technology that's being driven into vehicles these days that when you think about a gearhead type automotive individual that might have existed in the 70s or 80s and like super focused on the technical capabilities of speed and torque and things of that nature, the consumer is different now. And the type of talent that you need to invest in is also different. So I would kind of, I guess, leave this for the group and anybody that wants to jump in my first segue of the day. That's not totally included in the question, so I apologize. But how are you all recruiting and finding ways to connect a different group of people to your particular companies that might have looked down their nose at the automotive industry, right? Or they come from, maybe they went to Stanford for an engineering degree thinking they were going to be at a social startup or a social media company. And yet here you are, GM or Waymo. So leaning towards you guys, how are you recruiting them towards what has primarily been kind of a static looking industry?
Yeah, I actually connect with this incredibly personally. I come from Amazon, right? So I was with Amazon for 7 years before I went to General Motors. And one of the challenges in this industry is you have the people that we want to retain, right? We want the people whose grandpa had a Chevy and, their dad only drove, a Buick and all of that. But we also need the people who are heavily interested in changing an industry and propelling it forward in the way that I am passionate about. And so it's making sure that we are doing both things, right? Hey, look at our lyric. These are all of the things that are sustainable on it. These are all of the ways that we're doing it. Hey, look at our truck. The new Sierra has, I think, 42 inches of screen in the dash, right? Like, I'm familiar now. I'm a truck person now, I guess. But also, it's combining those things. Hey, we're a tech company now because everybody's a tech company. We're also still GM.
Love that. Tuyen, how does Waymo present themselves in the market to say, hey, like, come talk to us? Why should you be here?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just add on to what Molly just mentioned, right? Making sure that we're able to essentially tie in the work that we're doing. I mean, first of all, we're a technology company, so we're not, and so I think in a way we've already been able to attract those candidates, right? But, for example, when I'm looking for individuals specifically in the vehicle space, really talking to candidates about how we are transforming the vehicle space. Right. And just really taking it in a different direction. But essentially not completely steering away from it. So.
Got it. Love it. David, I'm going to get you involved now. So Brian made a comment whenever he was speaking about growing your own and finding the right mix of talent to also bring in. And we've had conversations in the past as well about retention. So we're all focused on hiring right now. Some of that was because of COVID layoffs, but I think that we're past that. I think we've gotten back to where we think we were supposed to be pre-COVID, but we also are dealing with massive amounts of turnover in different organizations, so that those individuals, there's been different phases, right, of turnover. You had the people that were able to keep their job during the pandemic, who took advantage of the market and were able to go get massive pay raises, et cetera. But David, your expertise, you've really taught me a lot about creating a great workplace, and that's one of the things that I've enjoyed talking to you about. How can organizations flip the switch to become a more productive, more employee-first environment?
Well, flipping a switch isn't quite the way it happens. The quickest I've seen a significant change in culture has been about 3 years. What happens is that when you have a culture that's not healthy, it's rather toxic, it takes an energized leader to bring usually somebody in to look at changing things. I've been working with a manufacturing company for a while pre-COVID, and as we eliminated a toxic partner, we now have a culture that's developing in this organization that is extremely healthy from the standpoint of really being sensitive to its employees. Since retaining has become much, much more important, this company has developed several unique initiatives. One is in understanding the company's capacities for developing real quality, workers having pride in their work. That's been their number one focus since we began about 1.5 years ago, shortly after COVID began. Secondly, we helped develop a series of process meetings where actually men from the plant came in and participated in refining, developing processes, ironing out the bugs, so that now this company is being prepared to scale. And finally, they're taking on the challenge in their industry, which nobody handles well, on-time deliveries. They're going to be the leading industry company in this area for on-time deliveries, satisfying a need that their customers complain about, not only themselves, but of course their competitors.
Got it. Love it. This is kind of a nice segue into hybrid work. And we've all been through this massive change in the way we work. Look, I think everybody is sitting at home or in hotel rooms or something today. And if we were having this conversation in 2019, we probably would all be in our little office cubicles and working in that way. And I got to think that when we look at the automotive industry, we have talked a little bit about how it progresses into becoming a technology company like Waymo, or how General Motors is trying to become the most inclusive company in the world. And we look at these types of things and we say, like, how do you mix traditional automotive environment, which, look, we're not going to make cars at home, right? How do we fit hybrid work into the automotive industry? So Brian, I know that you had some comments about how Microsoft is doing it, but I do want this to be a discussion point for the group. So Brian, if you want to start.
Yeah, maybe I'll maybe less about how Microsoft is doing it, and more about some of the research we do, because which may be more relevant to this audience. And for that case, we are in the empowerment business, so we think deeply about employee productivity, organizational productivity, employee experience. So we do a bunch of research around this topic, and it's included as part of some of the hybrid work studies that we have. And so what we found is pretty consistent. We do it across industries. It's pretty consistent with the automotive sector. There's a couple of things happening right now that's coming out of the research is one, employees are having a new quote unquote worth it equation. Right. And that's translating into, making it more of a priority on their mental health and well-being as a factor in whether or not they're going to stay and be connected to a company. So that's emerged, certainly from the research. I think the second piece is as companies put their policies out for their hybrid work stance, either on you can work from home freely for as long as you want, if you're able to, if you're in a role that supports that, or you need to be in the office 5 days a week, right? And everywhere in along that spectrum, one of the biggest challenges is like what, why, and when should you come into the office? Because I think as workers are coming back, and if they're having an experience where they say, gosh, for the last 2 years, I could have done all this at home just like I did before, they're starting to think through, like, why do we really come to the office and why do we really need to be there? And so that's a big topic. And I think managers are in this position right now where they feel sort of wedged between the middle of their leadership's policies and approach, and then the needs of their people. And so, they've got this approach and suggestion that kind of we're thinking through at Microsoft here as well, put in a little bit of our experience leading through this. There's a first step of just, understanding your company's guidelines, right? As a manager at Microsoft, for instance, I know what our stance is on hybrid work and flexibility, and we focus on flexibility for our employees. So it takes an understanding the company position. And I think second, it's that individual conversation, individual preferences with every employee that each manager needs to be empowered to have to understand what situation is that employee and what type of work gets done, what's needed for the business, and having that connection and conversation. And then the third piece, which I maybe undervalued at the beginning of the pandemic, but I'm certainly glad I've seen the power of this, which is teaming agreements. And so as teams come together, it's sort of reconciling all those individual preferences with the needs of the team, and then getting to agreement with intention about how you work together. And I think that model has helped us, make our way through this notion of flexible work and hybrid work. And it's something that we're seeing a need for more broadly as all companies struggle with this.
It's funny you mentioned the worth it equation. As I mentioned, this car search that we're going through, which by the way is a difficult thing to do, but we did find one. But I live in Nashville and I live in the suburbs, right? But I had to drive to Nashville to go pick it up the other day at like 5:30, and we got in traffic. And I told my wife, I was like, I don't think you could possibly pay me enough to have to do this every single day. This is awful. And like, I don't think that I could, you could double my salary and I'd be like, I don't think it's worth it to do this. And there's a lot of people that feel that way. And yet leadership and organizations are saying, we need you here. And I think that, personally, I have a particular feeling about it. I've worked at home since pre-COVID, since 2018. And I believe that you can manage people effectively in this environment. I do believe in face-to-face contact. I think this is communicating with people with video on is part of it. I know some people don't like to get on video and things of that nature, but I do think there's value in face-to-face contact and getting together in person on a regular basis. But I think that organizations that choose to walk down the path of saying we need everyone back in the office are going to be the organizations that struggle the most with finding talent. Molly, any thoughts about how you're looking at this transformation as well from a General Motors perspective?
Yeah, so General Motors it's work appropriately is our policy. So whether that is you can do your role fully remote, work appropriately. If that's what you want to do, that's what we do. Obviously, in manufacturing, you can't build cars at home. And this isn't a singular issue, right? This isn't just General Motors in manufacturing. I come from Amazon. This is an Amazon issue. This is anybody that has a plant or a fulfillment center or what have you. So one thing that we've been doing specifically is pushing on our hiring managers to say, okay, if this is a job where you would only actually need to be on site 3 days a week, are we open to having that person travel, right? Especially when you look at the research around who is more willing to go back into the office. I was remote pre-COVID after I had my daughter, right? Okay, so if we want to truly be the world's most inclusive company, what can we do to push those boundaries for what does it actually look like in manufacturing? Can you travel to be on site 3 days a week and then do your admin work at home 2 days a week? Or, how do we balance this? And then how do we make sure that those who are on site are having a great time, the best time that we can provide, right? So that's what we've been doing.
I love that you brought up the word inclusivity there, because I think it's a great, we get so stuck on DE&I being like how we look, like how we present ourselves being the main driver of DEI, and it's not, right? There's so many things that go into being an inclusive organization, and your story of motherhood and what that looks like, I think, is a great analogy for that. Tuyen, what is your perspective from Waymo and a hybrid work environment and how you all are managing?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're taking a very I mean, we put so much thought into this. I never realized how much work it could take to just even think about this concept. But we're taking a really thoughtful approach here at Waymo. We really want folks to be able to safely come back to the office while really still achieving mission velocity as we continue to build, deploy, and commercialize the Waymo driver. So we've created specific approaches. Similar to some of the things that I'm hearing for various roles at Waymo, with some of the roles being in office full-time, 5 days a week, or other roles being in office 2 or 3 times a week. And then some are just geo-flex. I mean, I think like myself as a recruiter, I get to be remote now moving forward. So, we're really hopeful that our hybrid approach will empower our fast-growing teams to be productive as we continue to build a strong culture and continue to give Waymo access to great talent throughout, just across the different locations, Bay Area and beyond.
For sure. So David, you as a consultant of the group have a perspective that you get to see different organizations, right? And you get to see companies that have maybe embraced hybrid work and those that haven't, and seen how their retention or their ability to attract talent has potentially been swayed by that. Do you mind talking a bit about the impact that you've seen on organizations and how organizations can navigate this conversation?
Yeah, I've certainly had a variety of experiences since COVID came on the scene. And the reality is that COVID really disrupted a fairly calm, you work in the workplace environment overall. The experience varies a lot between companies. One company that I've been working with for quite a while, they really developed a war between those who wanted to be in the workplace and those who wanted to stay at home. And the consequence of that was they lost probably 15 to 20% of their employees who insisted that they wanted to work at home exclusively, despite there being a huge argument of the value of having interaction in the office between everybody. So they lost a significant number of their employees. But the good news is that they've been the recipient of a large number of quality people brought about by a terrific recruiter who are very, very happy to work in the office. There are many people that love the interaction, the water cooler talk, the exchange, how's your son doing, and so on. I think that, it's really disrupted things, but the smart leaders, I think, in the companies that I'm working with have been able to figure out how to do it well and maximize the interest and the happiness of their employees.
Thank you, David. So I do have one question from the group that before we transition, I'd like to throw to everyone. And it's kind of an opinion laced question, but it basically was, do you all see working from home being productive? And I think that what I've heard from all of you is that the answer is that yes. Does anybody disagree with productivity issues, or have you seen productivity issues, or maybe can provide any insight? Brian, any research as well?
Yeah, it's funny when David was talking, it reminded me of one of the early insights we had where it was, and don't quote me on the specific numbers, but it was like 68% of employees want to be at work so they can focus and get work done. And it was like 67% of employees want to be at home so they can focus and get work done. It was like this paradox that was emerging, which means no matter how we personally feel about it, everybody has their own, needs and styles and everything that, which is one of the things I love about GM's inclusivity push in their aspirations around that. I would say, regardless of my opinion, I've lived like a hybrid work style, being in the field at Microsoft for 20 plus years. I'm just used to this. So working from home, working at a customer site, working in a hotel, working wherever is just natural to me, and the type of work I do, it's fine. I will say, when we started reopening our offices, one of the things that did take a hit was this notion of like strong ties versus weak ties. Right. And so I feel like the core team that would work together, in these environments through the pandemic, because we got really efficient to try to be respectful of everybody's time, it strengthened the bonds of the teams that work closely together. It also weakened the ties of the broader network, just because those casual interactions you might have when you're traveling or in an office didn't happen as often and didn't happen as organically. And so that's something we are thinking about. It's one of those things that feed into why come back into the office, what type of work is appropriate when you do get together in the office. And there's certain types of work that just seem to work better. We just did a session that was a lot of ideation, brainstorming, and just talking through a bunch of problems, which if it were over Teams or some other environment, we might have struggled and took longer, but being together, we were able to just get in. Everybody's excited. We just knocked down a bunch of things. And so I'm thinking through personally, like that's going to be it's not going to be an and or question. It's just going to be this continuum and more of a sophistication and evolution in the way we work.
I agree, at the risk of beating that horse, because I'm sure we could all talk about it. I think the case by case basis here is having real discussions with your organization, talking to your employees, and understanding what can be accomplished in person and what can't. I love the ideation thing, because I know that anytime that we're on Zoom calls, if somebody turns their video off, it's like they're probably working on something else, right? Like if we're supposed to be in this mode together, it's hard, right? Because there's so many distractions as well. If you're in a meeting room, you all are focused on achieving that same objective. Whenever you have my 3 screens up in front of me, even here, I've got Slack messages going off, and I thought I turned them off before we ever hopped on here so I could focus. So I've had to remove that. And there's so many distractions at home that can often block that out. But when I go to an office, there's a lot of distractions in an office too, right? When we think about productivity. The water cooler talk is a distraction that you may not get at home. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know that there's an answer. I think that we're all humans and that we crave interaction of some sort, and we all like it differently. So we got to figure it out, and we got to talk about it. That's the most important part. Talk about it. So let's move. We're getting a lot of good questions coming in, so I want to save time there. But I do want to transition to diversity, equity, and inclusion. The Talent Tide podcast is sponsored by Endevis. Endevis is a full-service recruiting firm offering a broad range of solutions, from professional contracting to retained and contingency search to recruitment outsourcing. Endevis prides itself on its core values of being bold, accountable, help first, passionate, and results-driven to ensure the talent we bring to our partners matches their core values and overall mission. For more information, please visit endevis.com. That is ENDEVIS.com. And one of the things that Waymo is doing is employee resource groups. And I'm sure that Microsoft and GM have them as well. Lots of organizations have something similar. But it came up in the conversation with Tuyen as well whenever we were prepping for this. And I really liked the thought process behind it. So can you, Tuyen, talk about can you give an overview of what these employee resource groups look like and the impact that you believe it has on the cultural evolution of Waymo as an organization?
Yeah, I love this question. I think, so again, at Waymo, we have ambitious, mission, which really requires people from all sorts of backgrounds and all sorts of perspectives. So we're really committed to building an equitable, inclusive, and diverse environment. Now, this includes prioritizing our recruiting efforts accordingly, but not only do we need to bring in, these diverse population of employees, we then need to foster inclusion and belonging at Waymo to retain them. Right. So one way that we are doing this is through our employee resource groups. Now, these are groups These groups serve to, raise awareness to our underrepresented community. They provide space for employees to meet others with similar experiences, really allowing them to amplify their voice when there are issues harming inclusivity, and it creates empathy. So, our diverse employees need people who will hear them, who can make them feel safe, who can create a sense of belonging. And when it comes to, just aligning our ERGs with company missions and values, the company will be able to then recruit from a more diverse talent pool and then retain them as well, which impacts overall culture if you think about it that way. So ERGs don't just benefit their members, but they also benefit the whole company. So right now at Waymo, we have 7 ERGs, and I'm actually the lead for Hyphen, which is our Asian American and Pacific Islander ERG. And so, for example, Hyphen's mission is to really build a connected AAPI community across Waymo that nurtures, a culture of empowerment and inclusion for all. And as some may know out there, May is AAPI Heritage Month. So we took the opportunity, again, another opportunity to just really educate, celebrate, and recognize the wide range of voices within the community. So I do think it's really, really important and crucial for companies to embrace ERGs and really utilize that and leverage that to continue to build an inclusive environment.
How do you think an organization can display their active listening in those scenarios, Tuyen? So I think it's easy to say, hey, we heard you, but how do we ensure that organizations are displaying those same values back that show that they're truly committed to a cultural evolution and ensuring that there's an inclusive environment?
I mean, I would say as simple as action, right? So it's not just, hey, we hear you, thanks, right, for the feedback. It's really taking action towards that. So, along with Employee Resource Group, we've created a leadership council and an advisory group for EID. Their purpose is to really support our near and far term aspirational vision regarding equity, diversity, and inclusion. We've also recently hired a head of EID who's working closely with our colleagues across the different disciplines to advance our EID efforts internally and externally. So, I mean, easily said, action, but it's as simple as that, right? Really making sure that you follow through with some of the, the promises that we make. It's going to be key.
I always joke that the key to success in business is as easy as just following up with people. There's so much value in listening and then doing what you say that you are going to do and letting people know that you are doing it. So thank you for that simple explanation, Tuyen. We've got 2 more questions. So I'm going to transition to Molly because she mentioned the GM's, is it the mission or vision to become the most inclusive company in the world? I don't know which one it was, but can you talk about what that has meant, that mindset has meant to shift at GM and how it's maybe affected recruitment?
Yeah, so it's not a secret, right? Mary Barra has talked about 40-40 by 30. So that's 40% diversity, 40% female by 2030. And that is everything, right? So it's not just looking at it like, okay, we need to just like shuffle some people in. But for me, when I look at the company, one of the things that shows the action is that it's at every level, right? So we're not just like, okay, we need like 40%, throw some people in the hourly bucket, right? That means that we really need to look at this organization-wide. We need to work with our ERGs. We need to make sure that our DE&I group is really heavily invested and they're looking at everything, right? So I'm partnering with our DE&I group right now to review our job descriptions, to review our interview guides, to make sure that we're doing this at every level with intention and so that it's reflected at every level with that same intention.
Thank you. Brian, what is Microsoft's approach to hiring for culture and D&I, which actually is a nice segue into one of the questions that came in too. So I'm gonna second part that. with, does the group, so Brian, you answered the first question about Microsoft, and then the second question we can segue to is it possible that employers are hurting themselves when it comes to finding the best possible candidate with the emphasis on diversity and inclusion? So
Okay, we'll save that one. Maybe I'll
that's a thick one. I know.
Yeah, and I've got it clear. No, there's no sacrifice. You hire the best person for the job, period. But we can talk about that more later. I mean, when we talk about our approach to hiring for culture and D&I, you'll find some similarities, Molly and Tuyen and I, in this. Like, we have a clear mission at Microsoft, and ours is around empowerment, right? Empower every person, every organization on the planet to achieve more. And we have an ambition and a mission that big. You also need to reflect and represent that population that you're trying to serve, which for us is everyone on the planet. And so it is packed within that mission, our commitment to diversity and inclusion. We publish an annual report to hold ourselves accountable, very public about our progress and our goals and our challenges and the investments we're making, that anybody could read that's interested in the progress. So that's important. When it comes to culture, and when I think of hiring, we're grounded in the growth mindset, right? And we tend to look for learn-it-alls to simplify what that's about, versus know-it-alls. And we've undergone a long transformation, I'd say 8+ years, within our company that's well documented. And David talked about the time it takes to truly make a company cultural transformation. And I was nodding my head in agreement, because it does take time. And I've been here a long time. And so, foundationally, we look for growth mindset, which means, are people learning and growing? Even if they've had a same job with the same company for a long time and they're applying to Microsoft, what are they doing along the way to learn and grow? Have they moved around, different experience, and tried different things? Are we seeing evidence in that, and that they're always pushing themselves to grow and adapt? That's like the core, no matter what role, no matter what part of Microsoft. We look for that, and it shows up on the resume. I think a second concept that we started doing about 5 years ago or so is this notion of screening in. And I think what we were finding is that, our job descriptions, our job requirements were starting to limit, screening out candidates. That was impacting the type of talent that we would reach, just because we were perhaps requiring a college degree, when that role, did it really require a college degree, or we required X amount of years of experience, when did it really require that many years of experience? And so all that work, Molly mentions some of that work GM's doing as well, end to end on the process, it is really where it starts to make things real. Because you can have a concept and an idea and a notion to go do this, but if your processes and structures don't support it, all the way through from the moment a candidate demonstrates interest and gets selected, to that entire experience, all the way through to what is the makeup of the interview panel, to what is the experience when they're brought in and onboarded, et cetera. So we've taken a look at it end to end. It's a multi-year journey. We still have a lot of work to do, but we're making good progress.
I like what you said about the job requirements and that piece, because there's a well-known statistic, and my mind is blanking a little bit on it, but I believe that it goes something like 70% of men will apply to a job that they have less than the 100% qualifications for, but only 30% of women will apply for a job that they are fully. Molly and Tuyen are shaking their head like they know.
So
Can you help me finish it?
You're really close. It's I can't remember the exact number, but it's like the resounding majority of men will apply if they meet 40% of like the basic qualifications.
Okay.
And the resounding majority of women won't apply unless they meet every single basic qualification, and then usually some of the preferred.
These dang arrogant men, I tell you what. I've seen it in real life. My wife has tremendous anxiety herself about applying for a job potentially that she doesn't have. She's like, I don't have this bullet point. And I'm like, who cares? And that's just a difference in the way that we view it, right? And I don't know how it's an interesting big picture problem. Maybe it's cultural here in America. I don't know. But if Tuyen or Molly want to chime in on any of that, I'd love to have that conversation if you'd like to talk about it, and how we can improve our job descriptions, et cetera, or maybe what you're doing at GM or at Waymo to be more inclusive to everyone.
Tuyen, do you want to start? And I can add on, or you want me to go?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it goes beyond the job description, right? That's the starting point. But I think even in the way that we upskill our front end, so our sourcers or recruiters, that initial engagement, how they're interacting with them, using appropriate pronouns, right, et cetera. Some of that, so it starts there. But I think what really needs to happen is, and we did this specifically with product, where, you know, myself and of course a group of folks and an EID expert really sat down and looked at the different stages of the hiring process and really breaking it down and understanding where are the opportunities and really analyzing what we can do to make it more equitable or inclusive. So I think it goes beyond the job description, but when it comes to the job description, those are some of the things you want to do, is essentially having the requirements, the preferred as well, so that it's very clear for groups, as we mentioned, with women who understand that it's not necessarily, right, you don't have to meet all these things, because usually it's lumped in the job description, but you really want to specify what's required and then what's some of the preferred language, making sure that you're advertising perhaps the benefits and some of the, benefits and perks for our underrepresented groups within that job description, or, you know, on your website. It's going to be really important as well to attract talent.
Yeah, I'll yes and that, and kind of go back to what Brian was saying about, you know, does a job really need a degree, right? If you look holistically at where we are, we know that getting that degree is a barrier to certain groups more than others. So by even just requiring that, who are you screening out? So how can we make sure that our basic qualifications are truly the basic qualifications for a job? Good communication, not a basic qualification. That doesn't even mean the same thing for you that it does for me, right? What does that, I talk a lot. A lot of people think that that is not good communication. I disagree. I'm over communicative. But how can we make sure that we are bringing the right people in and not screening people out for things that they are reading between the lines, right? How can we make sure if a job description says that we're looking for an athlete, we know that women are less likely to apply to that, right? We don't maybe know why, but we know that that's a word that turns a lot of people off. Okay, so let's scrap that. So it's really just making sure that it's intentional and that you're looking at that across the board, right? So even when they start at your company, what does that look like for everybody? What are the barriers to that, right? How are we removing obstacles so that everybody has equity in joining?
I like a lot of what you guys are saying. This is really good stuff. I wish we had like 2 hours, because there's a lot of good questions here. And I feel like we could just keep going and expanding on these topics. There's a couple of similar questions that I'm looking at. And so, David, I'm going to come to you. And I'd like to hear how you feel that legacy jobs are being filled with new talent. So there's two questions. One's kind of around machinist, right? Skilled trades, I think we can all agree, are very difficult to fill role, probably for all of our organizations, and their needs, even in tech companies, and what those skilled trades are. So David, maybe you could talk about how we can do a better job of filling these legacy roles, and how do we attract that type of talent to our organizations?
Well, one of the resources that many companies overlook are their own employees. I'm working with two different companies at this moment, that one of whom is such a wonderful place to work that family and friends are recommended and often get hired by this company. Another organization I'm working with, which is fairly toxic and difficult to work in, people are holding back. They know people, they know investors, they know good introductions exist, but because the company is so toxic currently, they are withholding those names and introductions from the ownership and the management of the company. So it comes down to me as a form of the culture of the organization, how we do things around here. That has to have the kind of feel that your employees are volunteering to do their job. They're in it wholeheartedly. That's the difference between a culture that is healthy in an organization that really wants to have people fully participating, and one in which perhaps they don't understand that if they cultivate the goodwill, the engagement of their employees, they've got a tremendous asset for recruitment.
Absolutely. I think we can all agree that referrals are a fantastic source for hires, right? I mean, what better person to say that you should come work here than somebody that's working there? So that question leads to another question that is comparable, and I'm actually interested. I want this to be. I want everybody to get involved here. So the question reads: how are your organizations flexing your hiring and retention plans for a younger workforce that prioritizes different items compared to an older workforce? So Gen Y, Gen Z versus baby boomers, Gen X, without alienating the older workforce. So how are you merging Gen Z and millennials with baby boomers and Gen Xers in the workplace? Who wants to take that one on?
Yeah,
Brian came off mute. Brian came off mute when I was looking at him, so that was kind of like raising your hand in class. So
yeah, hit me with it again.
Okay. How are your organizations flexing the prioritization of what Gen Z and millennials want versus what that of baby boomers and Gen Xers? How are those being merged, or how are you managing that?
I think while you definitely see trends across generations, we try to stay really disciplined around people as individuals and making sure that we're providing the flexibility and resources for everybody. We have that conversation. You'll have that conversation all the time where like I'm a Gen Xer, and like there's stereotypical Gen X things about me that are probably true, and then there's a bunch that are false, right? And so it's hard to do that at scale. I think there's a belief that hey, certain things appeal to different people, but when you have a workforce as large as Microsoft, going up to 180,000 globally in every market, you really have to stay out of some of the traps of generational requirements or other things that can trip you up. That's my opinion.
I like what you said about managing each person, but how does that happen with 180,000 employees? Like how do you manage to those needs, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, it's about the culture. It's about the approaches. Like our initiative around like the hybrid work concept is flexibility, and we're putting power and empowerment in the hands of the managers to do what's best for their people in the business. And so you continue enabling that as much as possible. Certainly you need company policies and different things here or there, but you put as much empowerment in the hands of the managers, and they'll do the right thing.
Thank you. So we're 3 minutes out. Kim made a comment here in the comments about there's 5 different generations in the workforce or in the workplace for the first time. And she said she would not want to be in HR right now. In my mind, I actually think it's probably the coolest time in history to be in the workforce and to be able to see how all of this works together. Because in my personal belief is that at our core, we all do want some very similar things as well out of work and out of our lives. And so I think that's a nice place to put a bow on this today. I'm very thankful for all of you as panelists. Great questions have come through. It has just been an incredible session. We may have to navigate a part 2 to this entire conversation at some point in the future. So Abby, would you like to welcome yourself back to the group? There you are.
Absolutely, Chris. Well, we've done it again. We're at the top of the hour. We've got maybe a minute and a half left or so. We might be able to give everybody just a few more minutes to take that last bite and get back into the work mode again. But on behalf of the SAA, I can't thank you all enough for spending your lunch hour with us. And to Chris and our incredibly talented panelists, thank you for investing your time in the SAA and sharing your insights with all of us as we navigate through not only attracting the right talent, but working through retaining the talent that we have today. It was fascinating to hear that although we're all working towards agility, or the new phrase that we learned today, mission velocity, that implementing culturally effective strategies takes deliberate steps and takes time. We heard that software and technology solutions have made the overall process easier for both the employer and the candidate, and how people make the difference with either a degree or without a degree or skills. And ultimately, although we all need to fill open positions, the human touch, the human difference is extremely important. And an employer's ability to collaboratively meet those candidates' needs from working entirely remote or 100% of the office is the differentiator. So thanks again. Until next time, I hope everybody has a great afternoon the rest of the week. Take care.
Thank you all.